Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. And yes, hopefully at some point we'll get to see each other's bright, shiny faces, whether it's Zoom or actually maybe in real live person soon. So very excited to talk to you today about kind of SAM. We'll start with just introductions, introduction to not only the two speakers, and we'll also probably have a couple of people that may chime in with additional color as I talk through this. And then talk a little bit about connection and Anglepoint and why we have the credibility to be talking to you about the topic today. We'll set up with some basic fundamental definition of SAM, what we see as the challenge around software licensing, how to develop a sustainable SAM program, looking at prioritizing publishers, and then the whole challenge of data normalization. And then kind of the final thing is call to action on ways that we can help you. And of course, along the way, if you have any questions, certainly put them into the chat, and we have some time reserved at the end to take those questions. And we will monitor all those questions and then address as many as we can at the end. And if we don't get to all of them, we certainly will make sure that we follow up with you on those. So my name's Mari Peterson. I'm a vice president here at Anglepoint. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, sold SAM tooling for over 10, and been on the consulting side for the last 10 years. So I've worked with a lot of clients on their journey from what I like to call reactive to proactive to predictive license management. So, and joining me in the discussion is Len Duckman, and I'll let him do an introduction to himself.
Thanks, Mari. Hi, everybody. Very excited to have everybody here today. I think it was mentioned before, we've got quite a nice turnout, and that certainly, I think, speaks volumes for the content we've got arranged for you today. My name is Len Duckman, as you can see. I'm Vice President of Business Development for Connection. I've got about 28 years in the business as of just about a month ago. And I'm very, very excited to be here. As we've sat around over the last few months, scratching our heads to find ways to bring more thought leadership to clients, especially during this cathartic time of COVID, one of the challenges that increasingly has come up again and again and again is the struggle to build a cogent, defined, flexible, and effective software asset management program. And so we know that's a hot topic for today. We couldn't work with a better partner than Anglepoint. Just pleased to be here, and I hope everybody enjoys what we've got in store for you today. I guess I'll roll right into who we are, Mari, if that's okay. So I know we've got a few Connection clients on the phone on the call today. We've got a few who are not. So if you'll indulge me very briefly, by way of introduction, Connection is I guess arguably one of a handful of the largest and most well-known national solution providers in the marketplace today. We are a Fortune 1000 player in the marketplace. We're about $2.6 billion in revenue, about 2,500 employees, extremely high levels of certifications and authorizations across the gamut of the most well-known OEMs and publishers in the marketplace today. Our focus in the market is, and has always been, as I like to put it, solutioning for the very, very rigorous demands of today's modern, large enterprise organizations. So we have a wide variety of solution sets, starting from very creative approaches to sourcing, procurement, fulfillment, very, very unique tools. If you're not familiar with our marketplace offering, certainly check it out on the website. Reach out to me. Love to talk to you about how we're using distribution differently and being able to plug in really vital data points into an existing asset management tool or to your existing procurement flow. It's a very, very unique type of offering. But our solution sets extend into the data center, the infrastructure of the data center, and all points in between. End user device and endpoint device solutions around managed services, lifecycle services, detailed deep solution sets and expertise around networking, lifecycle security, cloud, enterprise software, what I call the building blocks of today's modern enterprise environments. That's us in a nutshell. With that, I think I'm going to turn it right over to Mari. We've got a lot of great content. By the way, by way of quick introduction, I've got two folks from my team as well on the phone. You may hear their voices, Stu McGowan and Norm Blau, who are licensing experts here with Connection Enterprise. So if you hear their voices, that's who they are. And with that, Mari, I think I'm going to pass the ball over to you.
Okay, yeah, it's good to have them steer correct me, because I can go down a rabbit trail sometimes with this, because there's so much to talk about. A little bit about Anglepoint and why we have the credibility be talking to you about kind of SAM and how we can help you kind of move and evolve your program to get those sustainable results, is we're a full service IT asset management consulting firm. So we help our clients along their entire journey, whether they have a SAM, well, everybody has some sort of SAM program. It could be Excel that you're doing. You're trying to manage what you believe are your material publishers, but there's always room for improvement. I had one client say that, SAM never sleeps, and I really have kind of stuck with that, because it doesn't. There's always room for process improvement. But our services span the gamut, helping clients create sustainable SAM programs, helping them with point license reconciliations, helping them if they're audited, helping them on strategy, helping them select tools and onboard tools. So all of those services are ways that we help our clients. And if you haven't seen this, this was last year's first time that Gartner came out with the SAM Managed Service Magic Quadrant. And as everybody may know, they don't come out with Magic Quadrants very often. And we were very pleased to be, squarely in the upper right quadrant, which, says good things about Anglepoint and how we deliver our SAM Managed Services. And I think that the piece that was really relevant to me when I went through and read the critical capabilities was not so much all the great things that Anglepoint told Gartner about our methodologies, our approach, our expertise, etc. It was more what our clients said about us and how we help them move the needle on their maturity of their ITAM program. So that to me spoke value and volumes, and made me, again, really proud to be part of the Anglepoint team. So we've been around. We just had our 12th birthday. We work with a variety of partners. Obviously, Connections is one of our partners. We're partners with all the tools that are out there. So we really understand the value of technology and where they start and stop, and how to help knit together an overarching cohesive solution. We're global. We're about 150 people now, spread out across the world, with the majority of it in North America. And we have deep expertise across the publishers, which really helps you answer what I like to refer to as the so what of all this data that we collect to better understand our software publishers. Okay, so enough about us. Now let's start talking about the content you really, really want to hear about. This is the ITIL definition of SAM, and I'm not going to read it. How I like to relate to this is, what are we trying to do with the SAM program? And ideally, we only want to license what we need and use to run the business. So, and that sounds so easy for me to say, but it's so difficult to do. Wouldn't it be great if we could just license technology just like we, pay for our water or utility services? And maybe with the constant journey towards the cloud, we'll ultimately get there, but it's still, a altruistic goal to again, just buy what you actually need and use to run your business. So now we're going to step back and just look at, what are we trying to solve for? So we have this ITAM program out there. We want to put together this ITAM program. What are we at the core? What are we trying to do? I'm sure everybody has some approach to trying to get a handle of their various publishers that are out there. One of the challenges we hear a lot of times with clients is, how do I identify my material publishers? And we definitely will be talking about that. But at the very, very fundamental stage, and many of you can relate to this, is you have to create these license positions. And there's two very disparate sets of data that comprise that. One is, what are you entitled to? And how you get to that entitlement position varies by publisher. Some publishers actually will share with you the entitlements. Microsoft and IBM are some of the partners or the publishers that actually maintain your entitlement. So you can get that from them, and it typically is best practice to ask them once a year for that information, just to validate that it syncs with what you show your entitlements to be. And then you have deployment. So what do I have installed out there? So there's a variety of ways that you obviously can get that discovery information. And we'll talk more about kind of tooling towards the end of this discussion. So typically, or a lot of times, we find that there is a over deployment, meaning you have more of a product installed than you have entitlements to. So if a publisher comes in and audits, true ups, license verify, pick the descriptor there, you're obligated for some sort of true up. But in reality, if you actually looked at usage or metering, that you could be somewhere short of that. So if you combine the two of those, or if you look at that piece, you have shelfware, you're over purchasing something. Essentially, you put those two elements together, and that's extent of unmanaged software. In reality, if you really understood what your users need to run the business and understand the products from that publisher, you potentially could be even further down than that. So, excuse me, that's the extent of the unoptimized software. And this is just another view of this kind of same sort of discussion. First, you have installation. So what do I have installed out there? Then what do I have licensed? And obviously there's overlap. What do I actually need for the business? So each one of these areas has different ways that you can potentially optimize. This area up here, if I can find my mouse, you can uninstall. Here you can cancel support. Here you can purchase. But we're going to continue to refine and drill into this. So ultimately, what we're trying to do, back to my earlier case of the so what of the description of SAM, is this is what we want to get to. This is panacea in kind of an ITAM program. So as you're thinking about either creating your ITAM program or starting your ITAM program, it's really important to keep in mind the importance of the software lifecycle. And the two elements that you really need to keep in mind is these two areas: license consumption and entitlement granted. Obviously, when you install something, that's where you're creating a potential liability for the business. So, and where money is exchanging hands, so you're paying a publisher or a partner for something, that's where money is leaving the organization. So in a perfect world, you'd like to have this balanced. So you really need to understand, where software comes in the organization and how it goes out, and manage that, and ultimately work to having a list of software that is very easily procured by your user community. So you should have a list of accepted applications, something that's easy, not only for the user to get with minimal or sometimes no requirements needed for approval, as well as very easy for the team to deploy that to the user. What you do not want to promote is, actually step back a second, typically one of the policies that we recommend that clients put in place is to have a policy that software that is not sufficiently used for the business within 90 days can be removed by the ITAM team. So that sets the stage for reclamation. You want to make sure that users understand that it's not their software, it's the business software. And you don't want to create the incentive for a user to, on the 83rd day, put a calendar to do or task to double click on project because big bad evil IT is going to take away project, and I absolutely need to have this. So rather than incenting that behavior, really think about what are the core applications that it should be easy for my user community to get. So thank you very much on answering some additional qualification or just clarification information on the registration form. Sometimes that seems daunting, but thank you for all of you that did provide a lot of valuable information that really helped me kind of refine what should be talked about today. And I'm sure most of us know the challenge is trying to put together the proper balance of people, process, and technology. And kind of the salient points that I gleaned from the information that was shared is it's clear that there's not a lot of visibility to where my risk is. What do I do about that? I think I always talk about software being both an asset and a liability. It's an asset because you need it to run your business, but it's a liability potentially if you're not licensed properly. So really understanding that, understanding who are those material publishers that I need to count and count well. How do I staff an ITAM program? What sort of skill set should I have? Should I look at outside resources or not? And everybody I'm sure is nodding their head. It's really hard to find experienced people that are out there. And then probably the hardest thing, and you'll hear me talk more about this when we actually get into kind of the SAM program, is getting people to collaborate. So how do I get them on board to create this ITAM program and for me to get the information that I need to be successful in communicating to the various stakeholders? And then technology. Typically, there's not a shortage of technology. You have a lot of discovery tools, and there could be a lot of duplicity in there. The challenge from a license side is a lot of times you don't have the visibility of the data in the way that allows you to make valuable decisions about licensing. Or you have to spend a lot of time manipulating that data to get rid of a lot of the noise that's out there. So this is just essentially, definitions again. We all know it's people, process, and technology that make up a sustainable kind of SAM program or ITAM program. And the secret sauce of knitting it together really varies from organization to organization. We oftentimes have clients say, well, can you just give me a template and I can just follow a template? And maybe if we weren't so driven to kind of success and really making sure that you're getting the best outcome out of it, we could say, sure, here's a template, but I can pretty much guarantee you're not going to get the return that you're looking for. Oh, and I think I forgot to mention on one of the previous slides, but it's on the slide itself. Part of the challenge is getting the executives to really understand the commitment and the buy-in that's needed. So a good rule of thumb for you to keep in mind and to educate your executives with is you should expect to invest between 3 to 5% of your total software spend in your ITAM program. So that's all in. That's, your people, any outside resources that you use, technology, et cetera.
And Mari, hey, this is Stuart. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Stu.
Yeah, I would just like to state that over and over again, when I talk to customers around software asset management, the conclusion seems to be that there's no real easy button for this, right? You really do need to invest resources in all three of these areas, and it's a continuous process. So, I just wanted to point that out, that it's not something you could just say, oh, I'm just going to buy a piece of software and it's going to fix all my SAM issues. No.
Yeah, yeah. Typically, and I agree completely. Typically, and I think even the technology providers, so the SAM solution providers out there, tell their clients there's no magic button. You need to do people, process, and technology. And you may hear that, but you may not really understand, how do I get that sustainability? So, and with the technology. But the starting point is to, as I mentioned earlier, is the executive sponsorship is critical. So I believe that the most successful ITAM programs are delivered as a service to the business. So the ITAM team delivers data and information to relevant stakeholders. So I listed many of them here and why they care. So oftentimes, if this isn't communicated broadly and succinctly, it's almost like sometimes these teams are like, oh, the ITAM team, the little fruit fly is nagging me for data again. So I would encourage you to, yes, that data is important, that clarification is very important, but you have to remember, you have to go back to those stakeholders and give them something tangible back. So obviously, sourcing, finance, and vendor management, they need reliable data so they can negotiate from a seat of power. Typically, they don't have that information, so they're yielding all that power to the publisher to say that, hey, thank you, it's time for your Microsoft renewal, and here's what we want to sell you. Instead of that, we want to dump that on its head, and instead of having the conversation be directed from the publisher, we want to arm you with the information, so you go to the publisher and say, you know what, Microsoft, this is what we want to license from you in our next agreement, and this is why, and this is how. So, and the only way that you can do that is to have the data to support those decisions. So how do you knit all of this together? And again, this varies by company. I referenced, wouldn't it be nice if there was a template you could just follow? And in reality, there's not. And most of the time, because it's so critical, nobody understands your culture, your people, your processes like you do. So you may be doing a lot of things right. You may need some course correction on some things. So that's where bringing together these, the people, who are they? Get them on board. I reference some of those other stakeholders. Make sure they understand ultimately what we're trying to solve for. What type of people do we need? And is our approach really to build our own team, or are we looking to leverage outside resources, or is it a collection of both? And the SAM process itself has to have rigor in it. Otherwise, you're not going to get to the level that you want to with driving the efficiencies out of there. I mentioned earlier that it should be delivered as a service to the business, and that's critical. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that I'm the ITAM team, and I'm delivering a license position for SQL to the SQL owners. And I have a responsibility as the ITAM program lead to provide them with that data. So you give them the license position where it shows where they're over or where they're under, but you also have to give them recommendations for how they may be able to remediate. Maybe they can remove it. Maybe they can use a different SKU. Maybe they can change technology, consolidate clusters. There's a variety of things that may be options. But what can't happen is for that SQL owner to then say, oh, thanks very much, but I have no time and I have no money. So if that's the response, then you need to have some sort of policy and procedures and governance is to make sure that that behavior doesn't happen. Otherwise, why are you spending the time to do this? The whole reason that we're trying to drive this is identify and mitigate risk and stretch that software dollar as far as possible to get ahead of any sort of audits. Anytime that you have an audit, you're taking money out of the coffers that potentially would have been spent on technology innovation instead. So if you have $100 million software budget and $10 million of it is taken up because of vendor audits, then you have $10 million less that you could have done for the business. So, and then technology, as I mentioned earlier, typically there's not a shortage of technology, but what are the elements that need to be discovered and measured in your environment? Who are the material publishers and how can you count those well? So that's when you start looking at what technology is there and where there are gaps and how to make sure that those are brought together. So how do I start? So, I could see people are saying, yeah, this is all well and good, but my management just isn't letting me buy into this. So how we oftentimes start is we may help with a publisher spend prioritization, where we take in spend data and and that spend data is not just directly out of your finance system, but we also would request for some of the material resellers detail on that, detail on what actually makes up that spend. So if you have connections as a big spend dollar, okay, well, what did you actually source from connection? And make sure that we're representing what is software licenses and what's maintenance, taking out services, taking out hardware, and get to who those material publishers are. And the typical rule is 80% of your spend comes from 20% of the publishers. The problem is you don't know where. So this just is an example of what this particular client spend was, and you can see that there are some publishers in here that may not have as high a spend, but they're still categorized as somebody that we should count well. And we fondly refer to some of these, the Micro Focus, the Quest, the Autodesk, the Open Text of the world, as the ankle biters. You might not spend a lot of money with them, but if you're out of compliance, it could be a very unfortunate situation. So we can help guide, potentially where you may want to consider a point in time license position. And what that looks like is, and many of you probably have seen this, on the top is actually a license position where you show where you're over, where you're under, and from what's deployed versus what's entitled. But what we like to accompany with that is, it's all well and good to understand that, but then the very next thing that comes out of your mouth is like, okay, well, what can I do about it? And what can I look for from a cost savings versus a cost avoidance versus an overall risk? And we can help assess that and put some numbers to that. And typically that begins to build the actual case for delivering and creating a sustainable ITAM program. So actually creating that funding to actually do something about it. And I think it's really important to educate the executives on really the importance of identifying cost savings and cost avoidance. I can't tell you how many times I've had discussions with, oh no, we don't care about cost avoidance. And it's like, you have to care about cost avoidance, because if you didn't care about that and you didn't do anything about it and you were audited, that's real money that you would have had to uh, provide to that publisher. So it's an important measurement. And I actually would go so far to say it's okay to have software risk in your portfolio if you know it's there. It's not okay if you don't. So kind of the art and science is balancing between both of those. So now we're going to shift a little bit to actually data and what's important from the perspective of looking at that. And I know based on that information from the questionnaire that a lot of people have SCCM. So, and I still say that, you know, SCCM and Excel are still the #1 tools that are out there to try to do this license management, but they're not SAM tools. So, you know, SCCM is great for giving you basic level discovery information, but the problem is, you know, there's lots of noise there. So there's different spellings of publishers. So then you have to go in and try to normalize that. You don't understand, you know, which of this list of products is actually licensable. And, you know, how about all the noise of the hot fixes? So yes, you can use this data to begin to derive some value or create your license position, but it forces you to do a lot of unnecessary normalization of that data. And of course, that's mostly done manually. So what does actually a proper SAM tool give you some visibility to? What's that value of that normalization? So first you have that software category here. So it says that it's database. So as you mature in your process and understanding everything that's installed out there, you can start doing some application rationalization and start consolidating and really have standards that I'm only going to have, you know, SQL as my standard database, and anything else is really by exception. And you have a process that you follow to manage whether a different database technology can come in, and a business case has to be created for that. Normalize publisher name, all the versions and editions that are out there, and then number of installs. So this is great for giving you just visibility for what all is out there and giving me some clarity on, you know, what's licensable and what's not. But then the next step is this. So so this is just the kind of the next level of the data that we're showing, you know, SQL itself, and we're showing what type of license type it is, how many entitlements do I have, what is the entitlement versus consumption, so where am I over and where am I under. So the tool does a great job of showing you that. And then the next piece of that is here. So this particular edition of SQL has all of these upgrade and downgrade rights. So unless you know that in your head, across all your publishers, you know, the tool's taking on a lot of this work. But still, you know, the tools are super, super powerful to give valuable insight. But still, in order to answer that so what of where these over and under situations are, that's where you either need to have somebody on your team that really understands the nuances of that publisher and how they license things and how you can optimize, or leverage third-party help to assist with that. So we've talked kind of about people, process, and a little bit about technology. And so I've given you an idea of where you can start potentially by identifying what I would say low-hanging fruit by a publisher and doing maybe a single tactical license reconciliation, or maybe a handful of them, and quantifying where there's cost optimization opportunities, where there's cost avoidance, and putting dollars and cents to that, so executives begin to see really the output that can come from this investment in a proper balance of in a proper ITAM program. But then the next piece is, and let's say you get that buy-in, then where do you go from there? We have a lot of clients that say, we don't expect that you have had the opportunity to create a ITAM program yourself. We do this every single day with our clients, and there really are kind of these three areas again. How do you create a sustainable ITAM program with the requisite policies, procedures, and governance to ensure that you have a sustainable and actionable ITAM program, that you're continually moving the needle and continuing to stretch that software dollar farther and continuing to mitigate risk? How do I look at my tools and look at assessing what I need or where I need to augment or where I need to improve? And then who are the material publishers? I've had clients say that, I want you to wheel in your tool and manage all of our publishers. And I would challenge that thinking. What I would say is, again, you want help identifying what the best technology is, and then who are your relevant and material publishers to manage, to count and count well. And then we can help you essentially teach to fish, if you wish, to understand how to create these licensed positions, how to look at answering that so what of the ELPs, the effective license positions. So this is something that Connection and Anglepoint certainly would welcome the opportunity to have a personal conversation with any of you on this, and what is the best kind of road forward for your unique environment. We certainly appreciate your time, and Braden, I don't know if there's been any questions in the Q&A section, but we're certainly happy to take that at this time. Or Norm or Stu, if you have any input, certainly welcome that as well.
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Stu.
Oh, Braden, it's okay. I was just saying, oh, you can go first if you got it.
Oh, I was going to say that we did have a few questions come through, and we're happy to move on to that now. So the first question, Mari, that came through is about usage and how to track usage.
Okay, that's a good question, and you'll probably hear me answer with a lot of these questions. It depends. It depends on the publisher, it depends on the license metrics, and it depends on the tooling that you're using. I'll use a generic example because I know a lot of you in the community probably have SCCM. You can turn on SCCM usage. And typically what we recommend is that you don't turn it on for everything, that you have a rolling campaign to turn on usage for projects, for Visio, et cetera. So you can start identifying where people are using or not using it. And again, to work towards having that kind of acceptable list of software products and the ones that you want to keep out of the organization as well.
In Mari, I would add that the publishers are not going to provide that information generally. It's not in their best interest to tell you how many of your, let's say you've got 1,000 users licensed for a particular piece of software. Well, it's not in their best interest to tell you that only 600 of those people are actually using the software, because they want to sell you the 1,000 licenses. So it's up to you as the customer to determine, oh, okay, who's actually opening the software and using it versus it just sitting on the shelf.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. As it relates to subscription, I've had a lot of clients say, "Oh, I don't have to worry about ITAM anymore because it's all subscription." It's like all the more reason why you need to, because that publisher is not going to tell you that that you're oversubscribed. I mean, all the publishers have different metrics and BIs that they use to decide if they're going to audit you. And you may have 10,000 employees, but you have 15,000 licenses of Office 365. So is Microsoft going to tell you that you potentially over license? No. It's going to be very dependent on your process of handling kind of levers and joiners
Yeah,
and the nuance of the SKUs itself.
exactly. And I would reiterate that, when we talk technology, the tools out there, whether it is Flexera or Snow or the SAM Pro tool from ServiceNow, or even SCCM used judiciously, will tell you who's using and opening the software. So again, that's all part of the technology discussion.
So Braden, are there other questions?
Excellent. Yeah, we've had a few more come in. The next one that we'll address is there an organizational size rated by staff or operational budget where the ROI in a system like this just doesn't evolve or a point of diminishing returns?
Yeah, I think a good question. I think no. I think there's a balance on that. I think it goes back to who are your material publishers. What is in your environment, and what should you count and count well. And typically, in the first several years, you should expect to get about a 20% return on your investment. And yes, I think that's a really good question. You should not set up executives' expectations that this is self-funding, because at a point it won't be. But you need to do that. It's like you need to pay the electricity company if you expect to have electricity in your house, even though in the summer you have long months and you're not using your heating. And I'm in Seattle, so I don't have air conditioning, so I don't use that, but I still am going to pay that fixed amount. So it's an investment that you're making into the company to continue to make sure that you're understanding your risk, and you're continuing to work on that process improvement. And you're never done. You're just never done.
Great, thank you. The next question that came through was, how do you address managing, monitoring, and compliance of SaaS products?
No, that's a good one too. So that's it depends. I think it really depends on the publisher, and I think the SAM tools are evolving in what they can and can't do. I think it's really important as clients to demand that publishers expose their APIs so SAM tool providers can consume that. But it's impossible for the tools to always keep up. That's where it's so important that you either have to have the expertise internally on those SaaS apps to how to optimize it and have that process of levers and joiners, or to leverage a third party that has experience on, how to manage that consumption versus, entitlement. And then of course the publishers always change the way they license their products. So it's a constant stir of the pot of confusion.
Great, thank you. The next question is, let's see. When there have been many hands in the procurement arena because you're global, how do you wrap your head around your entitlements?
Yeah, that's a good one. And it depends by publisher. Some of the publishers make it easier because they actually have portals or reports that you can request from them. But other ones aren't as easy to do that. We help you understand what sort of information is required for you to put together that entitlement position. And like I said, it varies by publisher. For instance, with Oracle, the way that we approach creating an entitlement position, which then can be consumed by a SAM tool. So you consume the entitlements and then you can start deploying those to what's actually, assigning those to what's deployed. With Oracle, we actually request all your order docs, your contracts, your amendments, and we read those and we create a license position, entitlement position that can be consumed by the SAM tool. And it's also important to understand that we can work with pretty much, Anglepoint has our approaches that we handle these various publishers, and we don't have to rely on you having a SAM tool to help you. You know, we have methodologies and approaches to, you know, help you deploy scripts that'll collect this data, do the reconciliation, create that position in time, and then document, you know, those cost savings, cost optimization, and that sort of thing. But it is, the contract piece is definitely a challenging piece, and it varies by each client how we best help you get to that place. But you're only as good as that data, obviously, and it's so important to centralize that.
Yeah, and some publishers are easier to work with than others.
Yep.
As we know.
Great. All right. The next question that we have is, can I negotiate with the vendor from a usage versus installed perspective?
Yeah. That probably typically no, but it also depends on what those license metrics are, and that's why it's really important to understand again, who are those material publishers, and what within that publisher stack is really important that I measure. I'll give you an example, you know, on Oracle. The piece that typically, if you're going to be in any sort of audit situation with Oracle, the piece that they're going to go in and really scrutinize is your database packs and middleware. So of those various products that you have installed from Oracle, you know, what are the metrics that you need to count? And you know, there's some manufacturing applications, or manufacturing applications that give you concurrent use capabilities, but a lot of times that's monitored by having a key associated with it. So, you know, unfortunately, it depends. I need to know more about what publisher specifically that question is directed at.
And Mari, I would add that it also hinges on how proactive you are, right? You know, I'll use Adobe as an example, right? You've got certain entitlements that you're licensed for in your Adobe agreement, whether it's an ETL area or a VIP agreement. You know, if you go in and do that cleanup 2, 3, 4 months ahead of time before you go in and renegotiate your contract, you're going to be in a much better position to actually you know, create a contract based on usage as opposed to old entitlements. So yeah, being proactive is key there.
Great. Okay, the next question that we have is, it's a little bit longer, two-part question here, so we'll start with the first. And that is, what do you suggest when the procurement team is adding product descriptions in different variations, making it difficult to determine if the purchase data and install data is accurate?
I don't know if I necessarily understand the question, really. It sounds like that's application life cycle, and it's how how a software catalog is created, and there definitely should be some consistency there. I'd be happy to talk to whoever's question this is further to get some further clarification, or maybe read this second part of the question to see if that kind of brings it together for me.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read the second. It says surrounding usage reporting. If you have an application that is only being launched versus showing long periods of duration, should the 90-day policy of removal be addressed for those that only launch the application?
So typically the 90-day policy is if it hasn't been used within that 90 days, then the reclamation team should have the ability to remove it. But you also have to be mindful of what type of application that is. Again, you want it to be easy to, if it's one of those applications that you readily give to your user community, if they need it again, they should be very easy to deploy it again. So I think if I understand that question completely, is somebody has to essentially launch it to do something within those 90 days, and then it wouldn't be up for reclamation. But if it's just sitting idle for 90 days, then it could be a candidate for reclamation.
Perfect, thank you. Another question then, here we go. As named user licensing is growing and we can't get info on usage from the vendors, there's no way they don't have the usage. Anyway, sorry. They can't get the usage from the vendors. Is there a way to push them, or are there some good tools to track the usage?
Yeah, I think that one was kind of answered earlier. And I do think that the user community, meaning you, part of what you need to decide when you're even deciding whether you are going to bring on a new application is, okay, how am I going to count that? How am I going to measure that? And if you can't count that because the publisher won't provide you with that detail, or SAM technology can't help you with that, you should really consider not using that. Look for an alternative. And push the publisher that I'm not interested in using your product unless you are transparent in helping me ensure that I'm staying compliant.
And Mari, I would add that publishers that provide their solutions via a SaaS model do probably have usage data more readily available than an on-premise installation.
Yeah, they're just not choosing to expose it, to your earlier point, because why would they? Unless they're forced to. And I think with the proliferation of SaaS applications, which, according to Gartner, it's going to eclipse perpetual or typical on-premise licensing this year. So it becomes a much bigger problem. And it's also something that we find is not part of the ITAM's purview. SaaS sits at the business level. And I think that needs to change. SaaS needs to be part of the ITAM responsibility.
Yep. But it certainly is a good argument to move towards, SaaS delivery whenever possible, because you will be able to, whether or not the publisher is going to be willing to provide that to you is another question, but you should be able to access usage data more readily than an old on-prem deployment. Good point, though.
Perfect. We did have one more question come through, Mari, and that is if we offer an audit type engagement instead of a long-term engagement.
I think that means a one-time snapshot, and absolutely. And I think that's an excellent way to start on creating the why you need to invest in a ITAM program. And it's a great way to see if you enjoy working with Anglepoint and Connection, and we do document. We not only create that license position, but we create what we call a risk and opportunity report, which essentially answers the so what of that ELP. What can you do about a over deployment situation? What are the recommendations? And we put dollars and cents to where that cost savings, cost avoidance is within that particular publisher.
Awesome. That's great. We did have one more question come through while you were answering that, if we're good to go ahead and answer.
Sure.
Says, should we be requiring SKUs/publisher part numbers on our purchase orders?
Oh, that's a good one. So that depends, because typically, and a lot of times I have clients say, well, I want to connect to my finance system. And I would challenge you on that, because typically your finance system is not going to have SKU level detail. But there are ways to get that SKU information into your SAM solution. You know, you can get all of that SKU level detail from resellers. So Connection absolutely can provide you a summary of everything by SKU, by publisher SKU, that you could then import or ingest into your SAM tool. And that's where you can do the reconciliation. So typically, you know, it's great to have it on the purchase order, but it typically is not represented in the actual finance system. For instance, a Microsoft kind of renewal will probably, you know, be a couple of lines, you know, Microsoft, you know, renewal, SQL, you know, Office, you know, that sort of thing, not giving you all the detail that you need from the counting perspective to that what comprises, you know, that X millions of dollars that you're investing with Microsoft.
Fantastic. Thanks, Marty. That's all the questions that we've had come through. So I think we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and certainly would welcome the opportunity to have a further conversation with you. You see both Len and my contact information here, so feel free to reach out to either one of us with any questions. And we hope everybody enjoyed the session and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this.